One of my favorite quotes that I want you to know is A.W. Tozer. A.W. Tozer, he made this quote or this statement. He said, "What you believe about God is the most important thing about us because our belief or our lack of it inevitably translates itself into our actions and attitudes." Should be on the screen this time. Read it with me. It says, "What we believe about God is the most important thing about us. Our belief or lack of it inevitably translates itself into our actions and attitude." This clearly speaks to this concept about perception. Perception. What we see, how we see God or what we believe about God does not change who God is. How we see God or what we reveal or what is revealed to us about God does, in fact, change our receiving from God, right? So this is the God factor, which is the first and premier relationship in our life. So God, our relationship with God should set the pattern for all other relationships. Now, what ends up happening, because depending on, this is in God's original ideal, but depending on when we meet God, usually, our human relationships reflect our God relationship. I'm going to say it again. In God's idea of original intent, our relationship with God should create and set the pattern and the blueprint for how we experience all other relationships. But depending on when we meet God, how we meet God, usually our earthly relationships end up reflecting on our God relationship. So God wants to He wants to make the first impression on our life. He wants to say, let me set a blueprint or a pattern of what a relationship should feel like. Let me show you what love should feel like. Let me show you what it feels like to have a father. Let me show you what it feels like to be in love. Let me have the first expression. Let me become the first blueprint, the first impact of the relationship, so that every other relationship that you experience, God becomes the model, or He becomes the standard, and every other relationship patterns or folds itself into that standard. So when it happens in reverse, depending on when we meet God and how we meet God and who introduces us to God, then usually we end up reflecting our earthly relationships and experiences on God. So God doesn't get to usually set the pattern. He usually gets the brunt. He doesn't usually get to become the standard. He usually becomes the fallout of our failed relationships, and we push those emotions or those feelings or those expressions to God. So instead of God becoming the standard of a father, then usually our father becomes the standard of a father, and then however that was, we reflect that or deflect that, if you will, on God, all right? So now what we believe about God is the most important thing about us. This shapes my worldview. How I interpret God, how I see that God, how I experience God, it shapes my worldview. It's the most important thing about us, because whether we like it or not, it inevitably translates itself through our attitudes and our actions. So our behaviors become translated through our perception of God. So if God becomes the pattern, and this is true, then every other relationship that we experience in our life also is important, because our actions and our attitudes translate through our perception. Are you following me this morning? So if God becomes the pattern and He wants to impress our life so that our attitudes and our actions can properly be expressed through Him, then also we take that same pattern and our interactions or our engagements with other people, proper perspective of that relationship will translate into attitudes and actions. Wrong perception in any relationship relationship also translates itself through thoughts and actions. So it's important that we see properly, not only God, but people properly, because perception is our reality.